welcome to Execute Chapter 66, a Star Wars literature podcast. We will be covering canon, legends, and beyond. This week, of course, we are starting with the books that kicked off the new revival in literature for Star Wars, or at least for me, they did. And we will be talking about the new Star Wars Thrawn trilogy from Timothy Zahn. And my name is Beth, and here with me today is our co-host, Ryan Schweck.
Hey, it's good to finally be here. If you've listened to Needless Things, we've been talking about starting this for quite a while. And we came to this because if you've listened to any of the Star Wars episodes on Needless Things with either me, Beth, or Chad, at some point you have probably heard us go into a tangent about the books. And usually, it gets the actually, and then we go into all the stuff that has happened in New Canon. So we decided to just go ahead and put it together and devote a whole podcast to it. So I'm glad to be here, and let's throw it to Chad.
Hi, I'm Chad. This is a podcast about Star Wars fiction, largely focusing on the new canon novels, meaning the novels published since Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm. We'll be covering other things, maybe checking in on the comics or revisiting, like Beth said, old Legends books that deserve discussion. Here's the thing. We all love Star Wars books. For me, a majority of my Star Wars entertainment has come from books. There are more stories told in the books than in the movies or the shows or anything. From Splinter of the Mind's Eye to Heir to the Empire to Lost Stars, the novels have been, at least for me, and I think for Beth and Ryan as well, the thing that keeps our favorite fictional universe alive while everyone else is waiting for the movies. I do want to say, obligatory spoiler warning, that this is not a review show. This is more of a book club. We expect those coming in to either have done the homework ahead of time, or if you have no intention to read them, maybe we can be your Cliff Notes. We will also, without question, be talking about other things in the Star Wars universe and spoiling those things too. So if that bothers you, be warned. This is going to be a fairly Star Wars literate podcast with a knowledge of the universe that we just... how to put it, a knowledge of the universe that is a little more advanced than other people may have. So we're just going to talk and not explain what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it probably won't appeal to not appeal, but it'll be a little difficult to keep up for the casual fan.
Yes.
But, I'd say it's more like fast casual. So we're not going to go all the way, fine dining into Star Wars, but more fast casual.
Absolutely. So if... as Beth says, we're going to start off with the first two volumes of Timothy Zahn's new Thrawn trilogy. So, Beth, if you want to go ahead, let's just dive in and start talking about Thrawn.
All right. Well, in the essence of time, because my synopsis, if I've been able to finish it, would have been 10 pages long, we're just going to read the synopsis from Wikipedia and get into some talking points based off of that and my 10 pages of talking points. One of the most cunning and ruthless warriors in the history of the Galactic Empire, Grand Admiral Thrawn is also one of the most captivating characters in the Star Wars. I don't know why it says in the Star Wars on Wikipedia, but...
it's because it's fan-written.
I like it when they call it the Star Wars.
The Star Wars. From his introduction in best-selling author Timothy Zahn's classic Heir to the Empire through his continuing adventures in Dark Force Rising, The Last Command, and beyond, Grand Admiral Thrawn has earned an iconic status among Star Wars' greatest villains, but Thrawn's origins and the story of his rise in the Imperial ranks have remained mysterious. Now, in Star Wars Thrawn, Timothy Zahn chronicles the fateful events that launched the blue-skinned, red-eyed master of military strategy and lethal warfare into the highest realms of power and infamy. After Thrawn is rescued from exile by Imperial soldiers, his deadly ingenuity and keen tactical abilities swiftly capture the attention of Emperor Palpatine. And just as quickly, Thrawn proves to be as indispensable to the Empire as he is ambitious, as devoted as its most loyal servant Darth Vader, and a brilliant warrior never to be underestimated. On missions to rout smugglers, snare spies, and defeat pirates, he triumphs time and again, even as his renegade methods infuriate superiors while inspiring ever greater admiration from the Empire. As one promotion follows another in his rapid ascension to greater power, he schools his trusted aide, Ensign Eli Vanto, in the arts of combat and leadership, and the secrets of claiming victory. But even though Thrawn dominates the battlefield, he has much to learn in the arena of politics, where ruthless administrator Arinda Price holds the power to be a potential ally or brutal enemy. All these lessons will be put to the ultimate test when Thrawn rises to Admiral and must pit all knowledge, instinct, and battle force at his command against an insurgent uprising that threatens not only innocent lives, but also the Empire's grip on the galaxy and his own carefully laid plans for future ascendancy. So right off the bat, I got some talking points there, because I don't know that I would describe Thrawn in this iteration as one of the most ruthless warriors in the history of the Empire. Because this is not a ruthless Thrawn here that we're seeing. I don't think.
I don't either. I think he's much more... He's calculating in this new iteration, like he used to be, but not as bloodthirsty or not as messy as it used to be.
I feel like he's going out of his way in many instances here to try and cut the cost of life and to help save innocent people. And that's not really ruthless to me.
Well, I believe Zahn is going through great lengths to make him more sympathetic in this book, considering that he is the protagonist and not the antagonist like he is in other stories that he's in. So the fact that he's the lead character and that you have to care about him, he can't be an evil monster the entire time. And I think Zahn has an image of him as a little more noble than maybe he was before. I think he shows moments of ruthlessness in this, but he's definitely not one of the most ruthless warriors in the history of the Empire, at least not that we've seen so far. So
he's more of an antagonist than he is a villain.
For me, he almost, in this new iteration, seems like a samurai. Like, there's an honor code to it. There's, he'll sell yourself out and go help the Empire, but he's still abhorrent to his code. And has a very reason why he does everything.
I mean, was he ever truly evil, though? I wouldn't call him evil.
I don't think he's evil.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's not a Tarkin or a
Palpatine,
Prince Zeor or anything like that.
Right.
But,
Which does lead to a question that we'll get to, which is why he's with the Empire in the first place. I mean, and this book goes a lot to explain why he's working with the Empire, but he does not seem to be 100% on board with the Empire's plans, with the Empire's attitudes.
Right. And I kind of wonder if we're going to see that in the new trilogy. Like, if there's going to be some revelation about why he's really here.
Well, I mean, go ahead.
I feel like he gives his reasons. He gives his reasons to the Emperor, but I don't feel like we've still got the full story.
Right.
Well, he then gives his reasons to Night Swan as well at the end of the book. He does reveal his true purpose at the end of the book. So we'll get to that. But what is interesting about the beginning of this book is I do believe it's almost identical to a short story that Timothy Zahn wrote in the 90s that was like an online thing or maybe in a Star Wars Insider thing, which was how Thrawn was discovered. And it's very similar to the story. I'm trying to find the name of it. I don't have it in front of me. So I think one of the things we see in this book is Timothy Zahn, who of course created this character in 1991, adapting him to the modern canon, to the Disney canon, while also trying to retain as much of his original ideas as he possibly can, and not betraying what he considers the soul of the character and the backstory of the character, while also adapting him to this new timeline. And to be honest with you, adapting to how he has been used and maybe will be used again in other media. He didn't write the stories on Rebels, on Star Wars Rebels. If people don't know, Grand Admiral Thrawn was on 2 seasons of Star Wars Rebels. And I highly recommend that show. And he did not have control over that. So one thing he is doing here is he is writing around Rebels. Right. He's and as we'll see as we go through this whole trilogy, one of the things he has to do with these books more so than he ever had to. Back in 91, when he wrote Heir to the Empire, he had basically carte blanche. He could just do whatever he wanted to do. He told a brand new story. This time he's working way more into the corporate synergy aspect of things, and he is working way more into. He probably had to get a lot more permission for every decision that he made, and he is appeasing more masters than just his editor with this book. So
he probably had a hotline to Filoni the entire time he was writing it.
Yeah, and these days Filoni trumps Timothy Zahn, which wouldn't have been the case, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And with that though, I think he's used a lot of it to his advantage. In this one, you get a lot of backstory about Governor Price, who had a pretty heavy presence in Rebels. And I really enjoyed that part, like seeing where she came from, why she's such an awful person.
She really is.
But it made me appreciate her so much more on Rebels. Because, when Sabine kicks her in the face, I'm like, all right, take that.
Well, I watched all of Rebels, and I'm actually in a rewatching right now. And I didn't feel like I cared about her or her backstory or who she was. She was just, an evil Imperial, yet another evil Imperial. And I didn't think I would care about her. But reading her portion of the book, I was like, oh, I actually do care about her. And her backstory is interesting. And not everybody who works for the Empire starts out as an evil monster. Sometimes they just get screwed over too much.
So along with that, like in this book, a lot of, some of Price's stuff is obviously about the mining and getting the metals to build the Death Star. And they've gone, this book, it starts and then it continues on the other ones that Thrawn does not support the Death Star. That seems that in new Disney canon, like that's a big thing. Apparently nobody liked the Death Star. Like the Emperor is all in, Krennic is all in, everyone else is like, no Death Star. This is a bad idea.
Tarkin kind of digs it, but Tarkin kind of just digs it because the Emperor digs it.
Yeah, and Tarkin really in the other books doesn't start digging it until he realizes it's going to work. And then he's like, yeah, I totally love this thing.
It's total bad. He's total bandwagon.
And then he's like, what? Oh, wait, I loved this thing all along. I should run it.
Yeah.
Put me in charge.
Well, you're right. And all three books do weave themselves into stories like Rogue One and Rebels quite deftly, I think. I think it does a good job of beefing up those things. I mean, when we see Krennic and Tarkin sparring in Rogue One, we also know that they were sparring with Thrawn too, and that he was part of this. And the fact that his TIE Defender program, which features prominently on the show, is something that is in danger of being funded because of the Death Star. And it's his alternative to the Death Star. So I do think Zahn does a really good job. By the way, I'm going to make a mistake every once in a while. The fact that Timothy Zahn named his Grand Admiral Thrawn means that sometimes you're going to slip up and say the wrong name.
Yeah.
And it's also, by the way, fairly egomaniacal. But let's see. He's the Sherlock Holmes of space. And he's the new Emperor. I'll just have him rhyme with my name. But I think he's done a pretty good job of weaving it in to everything else, into this new canon that we're all learning and all discovering.
And this book, they do a good job too of weaving in kind of some of his strengths that carried over from the old canon and updating it as far as like looking at art and pulling out what he needs and having these long-term plans that he doesn't really share with everybody that all of a sudden click into place. I think those in some cases actually work better than they used to. And part of that is, you had those times where you see some stuff from his perspective and how he's viewing things, which kind of helped me with this version of Thrawn.
And I really like the from his perspective portions that they put in there, because that's the first time we've ever gotten to know what's going on in his head. Mm-hmm. And what's going on in his head isn't ruthless, it's strategic. And he's always thinking 12 steps ahead. And I like seeing his inner workings a little bit more, rather than just seeing him as, here's this bad guy who's trying to kill rebels.
He's thinking 30 years ahead, 50 years ahead. At the end of the day, his final plan, his reason for joining the Empire is decades out, right? He's in it for the long term. And I agree with you that getting into his head, we'll get into it more in the second book, but I think, and one thing to bring up right off the bat is our other major character in the book, Dr. Eli Vanto. And Eli, who is the ensign who is assigned to Thrawn as his, interpreter and then as his aide, right? He's kind of the Dr. Watson, Jay Garrett character or whatever that we get to see Thrawn's genius through. Like we saw before. We'll get into later why people love that character so much, because I'm not 100% sure why.
I like him, but I was very surprised when you told me that people are insane for him.
They are. You go to a convention or go to any kind of panel on Star Wars fiction, they love Eli Vanto. And I'm the same way. I mean, he's fine. Like you said, he's a good kind of point of view character, but I don't get it. Like, whatever, he's there. I do really like that throughout the book you kind of see Thrawn training him at first pretty low key and kind of getting him to talk through things and define the patterns like he can until you kind of see what he does with him at the end.
Well, that's what I was going to say is you start to think, oh, it's nice. Thrawn has a friend. He's making a friend. Oh, no, he's building someone that he can use for something else.
Yeah. Thrawn has no friends.
No. He's not Paleon. Yeah, I would agree. I think Eli is, he's good for exactly that. He's good for bringing us into the story and for getting a slightly more human point of view on things. He's a guy who thought his entire career in the Imperial Army was going to be as a supply clerk. And here he is, out with this crazy alien admiral doing rescue missions and hunting down smugglers and pirates and everything. And so there is an appealing thing about that character. It just an obsession with him. I don't know, obsession is probably a strong word, but the love for him is a little weird to me because on the page, he's a role more than he is a character to me. Mm-hmm. He fills a very specific role, but I can't point to a character trait of his that I love or anything. But he's fine. He's a cool character.
Well, he serves a purpose, and his purpose is for us to see him get built to be used for something else and to see things from a human perspective. And it could be anybody. I don't understand why people are so insane for him.
So, Beth, what else we got going
on? Well, let's talk about not quite Governor Price when the book starts, because when the book starts, she's nobody.
Absolutely nobody, yeah.
She is no one from nowhere, because Lothal really is a backwater, just like half the other worlds we visit in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We seem to spend a lot of time on backwaters.
Yeah, I want to read a book where everybody just goes to the nice planets. And that's all it is. No visiting some planet we've never heard of. Just yep, I went to this planet because everybody loves it. And that's where I go.
My summer in Naboo.
Yeah.
Gadalenta. I hear Gadalenta's nice. Yeah. They just hang out and meditate. Let's go to Gadalenta.
Yeah.
So Governor Price to me when they're talking about somebody being ruthless, that's who they should be talking about, because she goes real hard, real quick. She switches from being I guess I'm going to get revenge on this guy who screwed my family over to I'm going to take down everybody.
She does quickly become a being of pure ambition.
Yeah.
That's what she becomes. She's more identifiable when it's a revenge story. But when that kind of blows up to her wanting to just have power, basically, she gets a lot less sympathetic. But I agree. I think that her story was okay. The little diversion of her taking self-defense classes.
I already brought that up to Beth. Yeah,
when we were trying to call you.
Yeah, the karate side quest.
It seems like such a long way to go to show that she's able to hold her own in a fight against Sabine on Rebels.
Yeah,
she had to level up first.
Yeah, she has a fist fight with Sabine on Rebels. And so to make that make sense, apparently they went back and had her working in a dojo or whatever, taking self-defense classes. So that was that's the stuff where I feel like the book gets bogged down a little bit.
Well, they made it, I guess, try to have a point by having her have a fist fight with somebody towards the end of the book.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, they do. Yeah, she's an interesting character. I'm with you, Beth, though. She never made much of an impression on me on Rebels other than just being the bad guy. But there were more interesting bad guys to be following. So she was just a shirt. But after reading this book and then as Rebels finished up, her again, I'm not going to say spoilers, but it's okay, spoilers. But when she bites it on Rebels, I actually cared because of this book, not because of anything Rebels had done, but because of the book. I was like, oh, now I really know who she is, and I still don't like her, but I know who she is.
But at least it matters. It matters somewhat when she dies because you knew who she was.
Yes.
Rather than just, oh, somebody else died. Okay.
Yes.
Another Imperial's dead. Who cares?
Another Imperial I'd love to talk about just briefly in this and how cool he is Wolf Yularen.
Yes.
And how they've made him a much, for those who don't know, Wolf Yularen was the white-haired dude in the Death Star Council scene in A New Hope. Right? He doesn't say anything. He just kind of sits there looking kind of Sam Elliott-like. Looks a little like Sam Elliott. And then, but he's ISB, right?
Yes.
He's an ISB agent. And I believe, didn't he show up he's been on Rebels as well. Was he ever on Clone Wars?
Not that I remember.
I don't remember him being on Clone Wars.
Yeah. But I thought they've made it kind of an interesting, another one of these good people working for the Empire characters. Where he he's a military guy, or he's not a military guy. He's a espionage guy. He's an intelligence officer, so that's even worse. But still, he seems like a decent person or someone just trying to do the right thing. It's kind of the mission statement of a lot of these authors is to bring dimensionality to characters and to people that you can't do that with in a 2-hour movie or a 20-minute television show. You just can't. And so, having these characters that are a little more conflicted, a little more interesting. I don't know. I really like Yularen in this. I thought he was really cool.
So let me ask you guys this. Night Swan, yes or no? Because I find that he is more of a plot device than a character.
I mean, his name is dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the name, it makes sense once they explain what his name means. That the Night Swan is a bird that only sings as the sun goes down. Meaning that he's there to fight when things are darkest, It's still stupid. And I agree with you. He's supposed to be his Moriarty. He's supposed to be Thrawn's Professor Moriarty.
But he doesn't come off that way. Other than that one time he pulls one over on him, and then it makes Thrawn so angry that he spends the rest of his career trying to take him down.
Yeah, I don't think it 100% works. I agree. He made no impact on me whatsoever. And the reveal that he was a guy that he met earlier in the story, I was like, okay, I barely remember that guy. That was 400 pages ago.
You're a random pirate on that one ship. Great.
Yeah, that was a while back. So
I definitely don't feel like it justified when he says, all right, well, you're great. You can come join the Chiss Ascendancy.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Why would you want that guy?
Is the Chiss Ascendancy like those villages in Italy that are selling houses for $5?
Yeah.
Are they just need people and Thrawn's just out there getting people to come pay taxes? I haven't.
The Chiss are going to be pissed. They're the ship's going to come back and they're going to be finally, Thrawn has sent us our resources to
Why
really
are you
help
sending
with our
us
mission. And it's Eli and Night Swan.
Why are you sending us all these white people?
Yeah.
The last thing we need is a whole bunch of white people coming to our place. Yeah, that moment feels really false to me. I don't, where he's, because, he doesn't have any, tell me one thing about his character. There you go. Yeah. There's nothing about it.
Eli, at least, you can kind of justify that he's been with Tarkin the whole time. So, Thrawn. He's been with Thrawn the whole time, so he can kind of fill the Chiss in. Hey, here's where he's at. Here's what we're doing. I've seen kind of the inner workings. Night Swan doesn't really have that.
Yeah, what does he have?
I mean, the idea is supposed to be that he has thwarted Thrawn, and he is Thrawn's strategic equal, and so he would be but he's not. The book doesn't actually show that. The book tells us that.
Yep.
But it doesn't show us that. And I think it's a failing of the plotting of the book, that he just doesn't. That character, and I'll say this: I think one of the problems with this book, and I do enjoy this book quite a bit, but one of the problems with this, I don't think other than Price and Thrawn, I don't think the characterizations are all that great. I think the supporting characters are fairly, is it Admiral Pharaoh, whatever her name is, like they're all fine, but they're interchangeable.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like a whole book where the plot isn't that important except to introduce you to Thrawn and make you understand how he works.
And his ascension through the ranks.
Right. Yeah, you just to get him to the place you need him to be to really start the stories of Thrawn.
And how he goes from long-haired hippie outcast to Grand Admiral.
Yeah. I mean, which is fine. You've got to do that when you bring him back. But, I mean, I think the plot of this book kind of meanders a little bit, and
well, it's very episodic, right?
Right. There's not a real big through line to this one.
No, Night Swan is Zahn's attempt to create a through line, but so much of it is episodic. It's him and Eli go and do this thing, and then cut to time later, and Thrawn's a rank higher, and they go do another thing, and then cut to, and the one thing that's supposed to keep it together is the Night Swan thing, and it's probably the thing I care about the least in the entire book, and so it doesn't hold it together for me. But hopefully we get a chance to talk about Thrawn in school. I liked Academy Thrawn.
That is one of my notes.
Yeah.
I didn't realize just how much everybody in the Empire hates non-humans.
Yes, they're space Nazis.
They are.
It bothers me to no end. All these people walk around dressing up like stormtroopers and all that. They're Nazis. Like, you can love the Empire all you want. They're bad people.
It was an expanded universe idea, a Legends idea that the Empire was way racist. It actually makes sense if you look to. It's kind of funny. I thought about this a lot, given where Palpatine's from.
Yep.
And in Naboo is a society that was segregated, where the Gungans were thought of as less than by the Naboo. Boss Nass and Phantom Menace is very resentful of the way the Naboo think of the Gungans. So it's not a total stretch to think that Palpatine would be a little bit of a racist. Plus, if you meet the Gungans,
I was going to say, to be fair,
they're Gungans.
They're Gungans.
But this is I think this book is one of the first confirmations in the new canon of this idea. And it's not that it's necessarily like it was in the Empire, the law. It's just the general tendency, the feeling. Right, is the sentiment,
Yeah, and you kind of see that in the other books later, where like every once in a while an alien pops up and it's remarked on a whole lot, like, oh, you must know what you're doing or whatever to be here.
Well, he's not just an alien; he's an unknown alien. No one's ever seen anybody that looks like him. It also, one thing I thought the book pointed out that was really smart, though. When it was talking about the racism, when him and Eli have to go to the academy for their wacky adventures, that one of the reasons that the Imperials hate aliens is because a large chunk of the Separatists were aliens, and so that is left over from the Clone Wars, and I thought that was a really astute point.
Yeah.
The idea that, the Separatists were from all over. They were those little fucking bug things and everything. And this is carried over,
Right. And I think that's something that I never, I guess until I really started reading more of the books, thought of, that the Empire views, even though we know the Separatists were run by, Palpatine and Dooku and all them, the general public views the rebels as Separatists.
Yeah.
And they actually, in Alphabet Squadron, that's how Grandmother refers to them. She doesn't call them rebels. She calls them the Separatists.
Yeah.
And so that's that's a good idea that, they were the aliens and we were the noble white people in white uniforms.
That's fair. Yeah. But I mean, and Thrawn does, and the Academy sequence has a lot of things, it also, the one thing that it introduced that I I don't think I'd ever seen before was also a prejudice towards Outer Rim people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Eli's from the Outer Rim, and he, you know, which is the equivalent of being from the sticks. And he gets a lot of crap for that in this story, too.
See, yet another backwater.
Yep.
Well, yeah, most of the galaxy's going to be backwater. Most of the world's backwater. Yeah, so it was that was a very strong thread through the Academy years, was kind of their, you know, these guys who were bad guys, the Imperials, who are amongst a bunch of other Imperials, but they're slightly less bad because the other ones are racist. Mm-hmm. And it lets you kind of cheer for them a little bit more than you would, I guess, because they're being treated poorly for the wrong reasons.
Because that hazing was way harsh.
When they try to kill him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's some tough hazing.
Yeah. You know. Yeah. No, I like the Academy stuff. I think it's kind of fun. But
yeah, I was trying to remember what else happens in the Academy stuff.
Well, he's given a lieutenant's badge.
Yeah, on purpose
when he's a cadet. Yeah.
To get him picked on more.
Well, that was one of the themes, right? Was that he may be brilliant, but he doesn't know anything about politics.
Yeah.
You know, he has no political sense whatsoever when the book starts. That's one of the things that Eli does teach him, is how to navigate politically. He's the one that tells him, don't wear that.
I do feel kind of bad for Eli, though, at that point, because, you know, it's not where he wants to go. Like,
no, he wants a desk job.
Yeah. And he keeps getting dragged around to, like, the Blood Crow, which, by the way, is one of my favorite ship names that they've come up with recently. The Blood Crow.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I didn't even know there were crows in Star Wars, but...
And, you know, we learned in Solo that they speak Italian in space, so, like, you know,
yeah,
we'll deal with it. But yeah, you're right. That is probably the most kind of endearing part of it. That and his constantly being passed over for promotion.
Mm-hmm. Which does make the scene where he finally does start getting promoted by Thrawn. I mean, it's a nice little scene where he pulls him aside. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we supposed to think Thrawn cares about him at all?
I think he does.
I think he does a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he grows too. I don't think so at first. But I think later in the book, especially when he does start getting the promotions and stuff like that, I think he does. He's not all bad.
They're not like BFFs and they're going to do each other's hair or anything, but I think that he would not have sent someone off to the Chiss Ascendancy that he didn't care about. I mean, unless it's Night Swan. Yeah. Never mind, that point doesn't make any sense because
it doesn't matter. Night Swan doesn't make it. He gets blowed up.
He doesn't.
He doesn't. He doesn't quite get there. So he gets blown up. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at like the summary of the book, and so many things happen, and yet not a whole lot happens.
Yeah. It really doesn't.
You know, like it's just a sequence of him solving problems, which I think we'll see going forward is kind of what Zahn's doing with all three of these books.
It's a good book. I enjoy it very much, but it isn't. It's a lot of setup, and makes all the more reason why the next book we're going to talk about pissed me off.
Yeah. I mean, there's some, and I do think it's interesting. Like, one of the things the Emperor really wants him for, and makes it clear, is that he wants maps how to get to the unknown regions through hyperspace, and you know, Thrawn doesn't help him where the Chiss are and where their bases are, but he starts helping him with how to get out there. And as we talk about all these books, there's a big obsession in all the new canon on the Emperor wants to get to the unknown regions. And this is where you kind of start to see it, which is an interesting thing. So you've got the Emperor wanting that, and Thrawn, you know, kind of reveals he's here to get the Empire to help the Chiss out eventually. And I don't know. Do they say? Yeah, they don't say the name.
No, it's still it's still a very vague threat. It is the Vong in every way, except for it's not.
Right. Yeah.
It's the same idea.
And we'll get to that. I'm still really unclear what kind of threat they are, but we'll get there.
I don't think we've seen the threat, actually. We'll see. But yeah, no, he I agree with you on the Outer Rim thing. There has been or the Unknown Territories. There has been a big push in a lot of the books, as you know, about the unexplored region, right? And the Unknown Territories leading up to, Exegol, right? And so it is interesting that's what Palpatine is sees him probably the biggest asset about him is his knowledge about there. And everything, but I don't know. I think that now, what did we think about his the way he appeals to the Emperor? Because it strained a little credulity to me that they would find this alien on a planet and they would bring him right to Palpatine.
Yeah, because you could just as easily get force choked for showing up with Thrawn as you could get, hey, good job, buddy, I wanted this alien.
Yeah, but they dropped a lot of hints, and again, we'll get into it in just a minute, about him knowing Anakin.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that Palpatine already knew that story, so Palpatine had already read the next book. Or half the next book. And he must have had the idea for allegiance in his head because he dropped so many hints about the time he knew Anakin.
Right.
And he's trying to draw this parallel, this contrast between Vader and Thrawn.
Yeah, I just assumed that at some point Anakin had told him.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
That he would tell him. I just thought it was interesting. When I was going back through the first book, I had forgotten how many hints there were about the plot of the second book.
Yeah.
Because of that. But he's interesting.
Well, speaking of, are we ready to move to book the second?
I think we are.
What we'll do is we're gonna talk about the second book, and then next episode we're going to cover the third book, and then we'll have a more general discussion.
Yeah.
Of everything in the context. We're just kind of going through details here and little things about the books, but I do want next week to have a broader discussion of what all this means for Star Wars.
Yeah. So the second book, I mean, let's get it out there right away. It is the weakest of the three Thrawn alliances. So Thrawn alliances, if you've read it, it's split into two parts. You have the Anakin and Thrawn. So Anakin back when he's in the Clone Wars, they're kind of going out and hunting down Padme, who has disappeared while she was looking for her handmaiden, and uncovers a separatist droid factory. And so they kind of work together to get her back. And she's there because one of her handmaidens, who surprisingly they've done a lot of characterizations of in the new books.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
One of her handmaidens went there on a mission and disappeared, so Padme goes out. And so you kind of see Anakin and Thrawn working together, and Thrawn kind of sizing him up for how Jedi work. And kind of looking at what the Republic can do at that point. And then in the end, they blow up the whole place.
Yeah.
This is, again, one of these weird lines that they put through all these books. They're out there making special materials. I think it's cortosis in this one.
Cortosis, yeah.
Yeah, that deflects blasters and can turn off a lightsaber, which is weird. It doesn't stop it. It turns it off.
Yeah.
But this is another thing that comes up in new canon again and again. We're constantly finding new materials or shields that will stop a lightsaber. And here it kind of makes sense that, and one thing I did kind of like, a detail they put in, was that they've made battle droids with it. But then also there's some clone armor that's got this cortosis in it, which is kind of showing like, yep, Order 66 is coming, and he's preparing for it for the clones. And then on the other side, the other half of the book, and there's interspersed, like, I don't remember, they're not chapter to chapter, are they?
No, it's a few chapters at a time, but it does cross back and forth.
Yeah. You've got the Vader and Thrawn story, where they, there's the Emperor senses a disturbance in the Force.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, just, there's a disturbance. And so we go back out. He sends them out together. And we go back to the planet where it started in the Anakin and Thrawn. And it is what this book mainly feels like, which is corporate synergy. And you go to Batuu. So, yeah, I mean, Batuu is where Galaxy's Edge takes place in Disney.
Specifically Black Spire Outpost.
And they go to Black Spire, yeah.
Batuu is the new Tatooine. It's the new center of everything.
It really is. And the problem is, if you were to ask me what makes Black Spire different than anywhere else in the Star Wars universe that has a bar and pretty much a bar, that's
and
where
some ruffians and
right.
stuff.
Yeah. There's no reason for it to be there.
No.
And
I could go make a lightsaber.
Right.
That's what makes it different.
Pay $200 and make yourself a lightsaber.
And I will.
They go back out and they start hunting down, what the disturbance on the Force is. And then we get introduced to the Grisks. Am I saying that right? Is that how y'all pronounced it?
Sure.
I have the audiobook of this one, so yes.
Oh, it is the Grisks. All right.
Okay.
So the Grisks are going to be our new bad guys.
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't really know. And this is a question I have that we'll talk about, how exactly the Grisks take over things. But their deal is, basically, they go to your world and vaguely make you give up and work for them. And then you start working for the Grisks. So
they are really, really, really convincing. They're great salesmen.
I guess. So they hire these people, and what we find out eventually is they have stolen Chiss kids, and the Chiss, turns out, use children up until they're 13 who have some sort of force power that allow them to navigate through hyperspace.
Yep.
So then we go back and we, get our Grist children back, and Vader in the end allows them to leave. The Grisks allow them to kind of have some otherworldly. They have a weapon that encases you in a kind of stone. They've got lightning guns.
Lightning guns, yeah.
They shoot insects that also do the liquid stone. So yeah, it's Vong light. And then in the end, Vader lets the little Chiss children go back. You can go home. It's hinted, it never comes out, that Thrawn sure does know who Vader is.
He suspects.
Yeah, I think they made it clear.
I think he knows.
I think he knows. And you kind of get that more Vader not fully trusting Thrawn. There's a lot of talk about who are you loyal to. And, Thrawn's pretty honest. I'll work for the Empire, but, if anything happens, the Chiss are my number one. They're his main squeeze. So, yeah, I mean, that's the basics of the book. Oh, I do remember. They do know that the Force word... the word, I'm not gonna be able to say it. However you pronounce it, is translated to Skywalker.
It's not for it's for the it's the thing that they call the force sensitive children.
Yeah,
they call them Skywalkers.
They called them Skywalkers, which was a little cheesy. I mean, overall, the book's not bad. No. I don't think. I mean, it's fine. All the talk about stupid old Batuu is dumb. But Padme is Padme.
I'll get in. I want to talk about that.
Yeah. She has various adventures with 3 dudes in a lockup thing. We again in this book learn mining is bad, and we blow up the planet eventually. Or we didn't blow up the planet, but we hurt it real bad.
Well, and it's Anakin that does it, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, I thought that was a good point, because it again shows Anakin. There's a very big point of Anakin acts really impulsively, and people tell him not to do it, and he and does it and causes a bunch of damage.
It's almost as if we could have used these character beats in the movies to believe someone's fall to the dark side.
Yep. If you don't read the expanded universe books, it does nothing if make the prequels better. Like,
They absolutely do. They
yeah.
absolutely do.
So, I mean, that's the general plot of it. I mean, I guess we'll start with, did y'all like the split narrative?
Okay, so I didn't mind the Anakin Thrawn stuff. I minded that Padme had her own chapters.
Yeah.
That totally took me out of the story of what was happening. I was like, get 100 pages into what Padme is doing with these dudes, and like, oh yeah, Thrawn and Anakin are here. I totally forgot about those guys.
It's going to sound really dumb. I like the idea on paper, just not on this paper. If you tell me that's the idea, these two dueling narratives, I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. But as Beth pointed out, it's actually 3 narratives.
Right.
Because Padme comes in a big way. And you just mentioned the fact that, and we joke about it all the time, the expanded universe, saving the prequel since 1999. The one character I think that still has yet to be completely solved is Padme Amidala. We'll get to Queen Shadow, which I think is the best depiction of her to date.
I agree.
However, even with that, I don't think that any of the authors or comic writers or even on the cartoon, nobody has figured out what makes her special. Other than her just being a good person. They haven't nailed her character yet. Anakin has been saved by Clone Wars and by Matt Lanter's performance. Even Jar Jar Binks is more bearable in Clone Wars than he was in movies. Characters like Mace Windu and people that maybe we thought were awkward in the movies, they get new life on the cartoons and the books. Padme has not completely been redeemed yet.
Which, I don't understand, because out of all, the characters in the prequel movies, to me, Padme seems like the easiest to kind of go from as far as the nuance. I mean, her character should be, she's the one that sees it. She sees through the Emperor.
Yes.
Or at that point, Palpatine. And I mean, really, if you look at it, she's the only one that sees through him. The Jedi suspect him. They don't like that he's doing all this power, but they still just think of him as a politician. He's a politician doing politician things. Padme sees him as he's corrupt, something's wrong. As the movies go on, or really the Republic, she's the one.
This is how democracy dies.
Yeah, exactly. That should be easy to write versus this Padme who, she's kind of running around, and a lot of talk about the clothes she changes into. I don't know why they were obsessed with that in this one.
She's Leia. She's Leia Light, right?
Yeah, she really is.
That's all they figured out how to do with her, is just make her like Leia, and she's not Leia, and she shouldn't be, and it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet, and you're right. She should be fairly easy. She's normal. She doesn't have superpowers or anything like that. She's a person. You should be able to just write a person.
Right.
And I think this is probably one of the best depictions of her. Mm-hmm. But even on Clone Wars, where everybody got good stuff, her episodes always dragged a little bit. And when you get into this book, and I agree with Beth, as much as I want to like her, when we get to her story, when we get to her chapters, she's so disconnected from everything else, and we don't inherently have this interest in her. It just, this chapters grind the book to a halt. They just really do.
Because there's really nothing in those chapters that you need for the rest of the story. Like, what difference is it between Padme gets there, finds out something's wrong, and then goes out to the Separatist factory and gets locked up? Like, that's all you need for the rest of the book. All the other stuff that happens is completely unimportant.
I like that they don't rescue her. I like that she rescues them. I mean, I think that's nice, and that's, something that, you want to do in a more modern day book. But it just, the stuff in between isn't interesting. It's just not. It
felt like it was filler. Like, we didn't need any of that for the story.
Yep. No. So now here's where we're going to inject one of the things that I know. When I saw Zahn speak at DragonCon last year, one of the questions was, what is one character you have asked to use and were not allowed? At that point, he revealed that in this book,
Lumpy.
originally, it was not Padme, it was Ahsoka.
Ahsoka, yeah.
Like, would that have changed the book significantly? Like, would it have made it better?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think so, too.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it would have been, I think they said at the time, it would have been after Clone Wars. So this would be the first time, and it makes sense why they didn't let it happen, because this would be a pre or a post leaving the Jedi Ahsoka.
Yes, this does take place.
Would be the first time.
after she leaves the that place. Yeah,
and
the flashback takes place after she leaves the Jedi Order.
Yeah, so this would have been like their
reunion.
So, I mean, I guess maybe they knew about the new season of Clone Wars, and so they're saving it for...
Well, they had other story arcs planned for Clone Wars in later seasons that were also going to involve bringing them back together.
Right.
She was not going to be off the show if they had done more seasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think would have made a better book. Yes. Clearly, just because Ahsoka's just so much more interesting.
Right. Although you probably wouldn't need that whole third act with Anakin, because you have Ahsoka, she gets taken to the Separatist factory, and then Ahsoka takes care of business. The end.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something I wanted to bring up was the stuff with Anakin and Thrawn. And I don't mean this dismissively, but I guess I kind of do. It just felt like an episode of Clone Wars. Let's just go blow up a factory. And it didn't feel the magnitude of it wasn't what I wanted in a book that was about Thrawn and Vader teaming up. It felt like a very small book for the cover with Vader and Thrawn, and this is probably going to be the only story we get with the two of them together, considering everything else going on. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like, they just blow up a factory, and then the consequences of blowing up the factory are that Anakin basically destroys a world. And then they come back to it later, and there's so much of the cat and mouse game of does Thrawn know he's Anakin that it kind of gets annoying. You're like, I know you're not going to answer this, Tim. I know you're not going to answer this, so just stop it. Mm-hmm. I felt that stuff to be very distracting. This book was hard for me to finish. I don't think it's terrible, but I didn't find it very compelling. I think you're right, Beth. I think because I stopped reading it for a while, and I think I stopped reading it because of the Padme stuff, because it just stopped the story.
Well, I just got to where I would skip ahead on Audible. I had Audible pulled up, and I would just skip. Because I listened to it more than once, and so after the first time, I was like, nope, Padme chapter, skip ahead. Another Padme chapter, skip ahead. And it's not terrible. It's just, I felt like the first book was so much setup that there should have at least been a little bit of payoff here. And, the stuff with Thrawn and Vader was good, but there was just so much of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we also didn't have an Eli. We didn't have an Eli Vanto, so we were stuck with, in both stories, two extraordinary people. Mm-hmm. You didn't have a normal person observing it, and so you got more of Thrawn front and center, and more of Anakin front and center, and Vader front and center, and you didn't have that, what Eli brought, which was a normal person's point of view of these people. And I have started to believe after these 3 books that maybe a little Thrawn goes a longer way. That maybe when he's front and center in next episode, we'll talk about the future for Thrawn. But I just feel like maybe, I don't know, it was a little too much Thrawn or a little too much of this without enough. There wasn't a lot of humanity in the book, in my opinion. But it's not great. I mean, it's not great. Everything Zahn writes is not great,
I thought the Vader part was better. Like I enjoyed the Vader Thrawn sections better than the Anakin Thrawn. And I kind of like the little tests they would do. You know, a lot of it is them kind of figure out how the Grisks work and how they're going to respond. You know, if we let a ship go, where will it go? If we capture this, what will this guy do? I thought those were good.
I liked Vader being smart enough to, even though when he was challenging Thrawn's loyalty, still being smart enough to understand, to see how things played out and to learn things tactically. And I have nothing but respect for Timothy Zahn, but can we talk about how lazy there's a disturbance in the Force, go find it beginning to the book is?
Yeah.
It really is.
You can't find another way to team up Vader and Thrawn other than the Emperor going, I felt something. I don't know what it is.
Go out there.
Go find it.
Yeah.
And you're like, and yeah, it's a mystery, but it's not a mystery that got me hooked at all. It was just so vague, and it feels like such a crutch to just say a disturbance in the Force, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like prophecies, you know. It felt like such a shortcut. He was like, well, I got to get them on the adventure together, and I only have a chapter to do it.
Yeah, and is some, you know, hyperspace kids being kidnapped really going to create a disturbance in the Force? I don't know.
I mean,
he could have had more than a chapter to set it up if he'd left out some of that Padme crap.
But I would even say, like, it would make sense if Palpatine sent him to find some Force-sensitive children. Right? Because that's one of the things he does. He's going around and, you know, still purging whenever he can.
Yeah. I mean, you could have really made it easy. Yeah, Vader's out there and he finds some little blue-skinned kid.
Yeah.
Who's Force-sensitive, and then go from there, but...
Yeah, or just something, or there's word of a Force-sensitive child or something, you know, like that there would be a little more stuff, but just a disturbance in the Force, which is a phrase that we just use, that Star Wars just uses willy-nilly sometimes. It felt, you know, I mean, that's a disturbance in the Force, and then also Alderaan blowing up. Okay, I believe Obi-Wan can feel Alderaan blowing up.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
You know, but like what was going on in this book did not at all register as a disturbance in the Force to me.
Right.
These kids were really, really scared, Chad.
They were really scared. I'm not saying that. And I'll say I do like the idea of them being their nav computers, because I like when they recognize that different cultures have different technology. That not everyone has the same type of hyperdrive. Not everyone has the same type of weapons. I like that. It's a galaxy. It's not, you know.
And I like
that
they lose the power. Like, I like the idea of, you know what? Kids have it, and then you grow out of it.
Well, and that's what saves them, right? If that didn't happen to them, Vader would have killed all of them.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, so I do like that. But I know you want to talk about the Grisk.
Oh, the Grisk. All right, what's the damn deal with the Grisk?
I don't know.
I don't
Nobody
100%
knows.
understand it. I mean, we get vague, like, yes, they come to your planet, and I don't know, overwhelm you with sadness or something. You get scared of them, and then you work for them.
They're like emo Vong.
Yeah, I don't know.
They come in, they get you really high, and you're just like, man, you guys are awesome. I'm gonna do whatever you say.
Yeah,
I'd be down for that. That's my type of invasion. That's my type of invasion. I think I read the word Grisk like 12 times in the book before I understood what they were even talking about. Like I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, wait, is this an alien species? Like, what are they talking? Like, it made so little impact on me while I was reading it that I had to go back and be like, read the explanation again. I apparently just glazed over it. And yeah, they were very vague. I still don't really know what they look like.
I don't at all.
I think that's intentional.
There's some spikes involved. I know that. Because every once in a while they'll talk about that.
Now, Clone Wars was going to bring the Vong on in like season 7 or 8, right? That was part of their plan.
That was part of the plan, apparently.
It was scrapped. And it does feel... They feel too similar to the... How do you pronounce it? Yuuzhan Vong?
Yeah, I think so.
The Yuuzhan Vong. I guess... Well, no. We're in deep. If you don't know who they are, look them up. Look up the last, what was it called? The Last Jedi Order? No, what was the New Jedi Order?
New Jedi Order.
Yeah.
New Jedi Order series of like 4,500 books.
Yeah. Things get real weird in those books.
Get real weird, real sad.
Yeah.
R.A. Salvatore still probably gets death threats. Yeah. It's it's weird. It's kind of like Night Swan. It just doesn't quite land.
It doesn't, and the problem is they're like a big part going forward, I think. I mean, we'll talk about the next book, but I mean, it ends with Thrawn basically saying, like, yeah, this is a major threat to the Empire, and the Chiss are about to have a civil war because some of them have already aligned themselves with the Gris. And,
But
like, I just
I don't get it.
I don't either. Like,
do you
Why
think
are they a
this
threat?
is the threat? Do you think this is the threat he's warning Palpatine about? Because I do not.
do.
I do, yeah.
not. I do not. Because he doesn't refer to them that way in this book. He just talks about them as this mythological warriors and pirates or whatever, and he doesn't believe it. But I didn't feel that they were the existential threat that he's talking about. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
my
what I felt like they
understanding-
were.
Yeah, my understanding was like part of the Chiss was already falling to him, so he's going to get the Empire to bring him back, or hopefully to get up his allies to fight against them.
I do like this idea of the Chiss observing the Republic and then the Empire from a distance to see if they would be, if they would be helpful.
Yeah.
In future endeavors. I do like the idea that the Chiss have been around more than we know. Observing things. That's why, you've got to mention Thrawn. This is right now in the current timeline. Thrawn and Anakin is the earliest we've seen him.
Right.
This is well before his concocted exile in the first book. And so it's interesting to see that they were sending these kind of scouts out into our galaxy to learn what the Empire, or what the Republic and the Empire, the same thing, were about. I find all that interesting, but if it is just the Grisk, you're like, okay.
But Chad, they're so persuasive.
They are.
It's so
And
dangerous.
They have their sweet MacGuffin device that'll pull you out of hyperspace and then disappear again. I hated those stupid things.
Yeah.
What was that? Fraggle convincing John? Anyway, sorry. There's a Fraggle on Fraggle Rock called Convincing John that they would just bring in. He could just convince anybody to do anything. It seems unnecessary, and we'll get into it more next episode. But it seems, again, it seems like he's concocting a threat that just doesn't. It doesn't land. It just doesn't land. There's nothing. At least with the Vong, like you can, I don't love that series that much, but they felt threatening.
Yeah.
They were scary and destructive, and they killed Chewbacca they killed Chewbacca. Like, they were scary from the beginning.
Yeah, and if you're going to come from the unknown regions, let's get weird. Like, bring some weird stuff in.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys just feel like some other gangsters who have figured out how to make planets go to their will, or whatever the hell it is they do.
Yeah, again, they were vague. I think I finished the second book still not knowing what they were.
Yeah.
And only upon going back and reading, going like, oh, really? Oh, okay. All right. They were spreading through okay.
Mm-hmm.
Their Wikipedia entry is pretty slim. But, yeah.
I'm hoping in the future, because I did like this book. So now we have Chiss Force sensitives. It was interesting. I think, they're all mostly female. But I'm wondering, like, all right, so are we going to see basically like Chiss Jedi, or, more Chiss kids using different powers in the future? Maybe in the new trilogy when we see more of the ascendancy, but I wouldn't mind seeing that.
Well, obviously they know more about it than we've been led to know, because the one thing that I thought was really cool was when Thrawn knew more about what Vader could do than Vader did, when he had him navigate.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, surely he knows more than he's telling if he knows that Vader can do this.
Well, he knows that their Force sensitives can do that, right? So why can't he?
Does he really know what the Force is exactly?
I don't know. He's supposed to know everything, right? He's Thrawn.
Yeah.
He knows. he's Thrawn. I agree with you. But I think that when he has Vader navigate, that's to set up the idea of these force sensitive navigators later. All they needed was a Sith wayfinder. Anyway, but yeah, I mean it's there have been people asking whether or not they think Thrawn is force sensitive, which I think is no.
No.
I said I like the idea of hooking up these kids and using them as navigation equipment. I think that's fine. But as far as what that means for the ascendancy in Jedi, I think in order for them to be Jedi, they'd have to come to I'm going to call it our galaxy for some reason, even though we do not live there. It's very far away. But come to our galaxy and learn the Jedi ways. But by the time they could, the Jedi are all gone. So I don't know if we'll see a Sith Jedi. Although I was reading, I was just reading a comic recently and it had a Chiss in it. I mean, it was like a Rebellion era comic that had a Chiss. I'm trying to remember. Was it the Star Wars from today? It might have been the Star Wars that came out today.
I'm behind.
Yeah, you're on. Yeah, I only read the Star Wars books, so I go ahead and buy them. So
yeah.
It's not the easiest read. It's not.
Yeah. So one more thing I did want to talk about this book.
Of course.
Rook is back.
Yes.
And he just kind of shows up.
Yeah, that's what he does, right?
Maybe he was just invisible the last book. You don't know.
I mean, I'm glad he's back. I like Rook, but he just kind of is around in this book, and they never really explain him or where he came from.
How much time has passed between these books?
I don't know.
It's a good question.
I mean, the Death Star is not complete yet.
No, but at the very end of the first book, Price invites him to Lothal to fight the Phoenix crew.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess
you got a couple years.
Yeah.
Until, and then in this book, it's because this book, the Vader Thrawn stuff takes place between season 3 and 4 of Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book takes place ends right before the first season of Rebels, or during the first season of Rebels.
Right.
I guess. Well, Price doesn't show up till season 2, does she?
Yeah, but even those, I mean, there aren't many years in there. It's not a lot of time.
No, I would like to see where Rook came from. You're absolutely correct. There was no indication of where Rook came from.
Yeah, he's just around now. And here's my invisible lizard friend who's kind of slink in the background on your ship and sneak in.
It would be amazing if the original book was written there's stuff in invisible ink. That if you went through and put water on your original version, the stuff with Rook would pop out. Yeah, it's weird. He does just kind of show up and is that badass Rook that, will probably not stab him in the chest with a spear, but
yeah, it's looking not.
Yeah, it's looking like not this time around.
Yeah.
But it's, I hadn't even thought about it. I'm so used to Rook just being Thrawn's bodyguard that it didn't even occur to me that he wasn't in the first book.
Yeah.
And then I don't know where he came from.
About this one, he just shows up, and I was like, "Well, there he is. Okay."
You're right. I didn't even notice he was missing in the first book until he showed up in the second book, and I was like, "Oh yeah, where the hell was he?"
Yeah, I mean, he must have picked him up somewhere. Maybe that's a story we're gonna get.
Maybe that's in one of those little kid the books for 6 to 7 year olds they made for Rebels.
Dude, I read those too. I haven't
Thrawn's special friend.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if what Rook does is a book for kids.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I thought he was effective in this. I thought it would. I liked the battle between him and the other soldiers.
Yeah, I really liked. This book had Commander Command in it, and just the constant get off my ship, and then Rook's just in the ship in the back doing stuff. So I thought they did that really well. So overall, I think we agree. Not the best book, probably the worst of the trilogy.
I would say, yeah. I would say. The one thing I would like to point out is this book is significantly shorter than the previous one, and the next one is as well. I remember when Treason came out, I think you, Ryan, said that it felt really small, felt really short.
It does.
And they're both just over 300 pages, 330 pages, while the first, where the Thrawn was well over 4.
Yeah.
Well, I know he's trying to crank them out, but we could put a little more in.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I mean, I don't mind a short book if it, gets to the point, but we just talked about how Treason felt like Alliances felt like it had too much filler. Mm-hmm. And yet it's the shortest book of the bunch.
Right.
So maybe he realized that it just wasn't a whole lot of story there.
He's writing it and he's going, oh shit, I better wrap this up.
Yeah, I just don't have enough story. Yeah.
And I wonder with Alliances how much Rebels hindered him. Because, with the first one, I doubt, Rebels doesn't care how he gets where he is.
No, and it ends right before Rebels starts.
Right. Whereas this book, we definitely you've got to make sure you don't contradict Rebels and you don't overstep Rebels. So, I mean, by necessity, it probably keeps your story a little smaller.
Well, like you said, with Batu and everything, this feels like the most controlled, like the most heavily vetted book he's ever written for Star Wars, where he's not in control of everything. Not every decision being made in this book is his by a mile. It reeks with, and again, I like this, but it's reeking with having to match the new continuity with having to sell tickets to Disneyland,
right?
With just making sure that the timeline fits out with this, and with introducing characters that are going to be in the cartoon and be other things. This book feels more than any of the others. I think it feels weird. It feels licensed in a way that Zahn books usually don't. Mm-hmm. It feels like they could have got anybody to write this as a tie-in. It's almost a tie-in for Rebels.
Yeah. Well, and the ending of it, like the big, all right, Vader and Thrawn, Vader reluctantly trusts him now, and his big payoff is Vader is now going to somewhat support and recommend the TIE Defender program.
Yes.
Which, feels like all right, great. It's just a tie into Rebels. Which I've never said, what is up with the TIE Defender program? I just don't see.
What's the big deal about it?
What Thrawn's big deal with it? It doesn't feel to me like. I mean, I understand his justification, having ships that can better fight the Rebels strategically.
And that have shields and things.
Right. But as far as Thrawn goes, it's never felt, and even on Rebels, which I love, TIE Defender just never felt like a big Thrawn plan.
Maybe, and this is pure speculation, maybe there's a belief that that's going to be what they need to fight the unknown enemy or something. Yeah. Or maybe there's a long-term plan with it.
Yeah.
He is always thinking ahead.
So that's possible. It does seem, I have thought about that as well. I mean, if he was Krennic, right, and he had this, or a guy like Krennic, and he had this starfighter program, and all of his success in the Empire is predicated on it succeeding, then that would make a lot of sense. But he doesn't really care about that stuff, right?
Right.
If the Defender program failed, he would just move on to the next idea. It seems, and it does. And we'll get into with Treason, where he really he goes to the mat for this program over and over again.
Yeah.
I was just rereading the first book, and I got to the part where he's talking about he's just trying to figure out what the Death Star program is because he's heard these rumors.
Yeah.
And he's telling Vanto that the Empire's operating under the misconception that bigger equals better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now, see, him being against the Death Star totally makes sense to me. Putting all your eggs in one basket that you can't predict the enemy, that's a very Thrawn thing to me. But the plan being he wants these ships just never does. And I get it. Part of Rebels, too, is, it's a kid's show. So, kids understand blue guy wants to make cool new toy spaceship.
And sell them to you, possibly.
Right.
They possibly can. No, but I don't disagree with you. But I think it gives a nice tension between him and Tarkin and Krennic and all that stuff, going out there. And it deposits him into that, like I said earlier, deposits him into that political situation that we've seen through Rogue One. Mm-hmm. And those other things. The more we talk about this book, the more it just feels like a tie-in.
Yeah.
The more it just legitimately just feels like a tie-in, and maybe that's why it's so short. where he's just like, okay, just give me the list of stuff I got to put in here, All right, we got to show Thor having some kind of vision quest. Fine, we'll put that in the middle of the movie. Wait, that's like, do whatever. But like, it just felt, it feels so licensed at times. And again, I just wish someone could nail Padme. We'll get to E.K. Johnson's depiction of Padme, and I think it's way better, and much more interesting. But I still don't think it's great. And at least this one was less episodic than the first one.
Right.
But I think that may hurt it, because with an episodic story, if you don't like one episode, you got another one coming up. Right. So if you get to one episode and you're like, well, like the Academy stuff I really liked, and then the Tabana gas sequence in the first one I didn't care as much about. But don't worry, there's another sequence coming up that'll be like kind of its own little story. But when you have two continuing stories like this that span the entire book, if you don't care about them, the book's doomed, right? Yeah. The book is just toast. There are some things to love about it. There's a lot of Clone Wars details in the flashback story. So if you're a Clone Wars fan, there's a lot of cool stuff to be living in that galaxy. And it really is the first story I think we have of Anakin post Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. One of the only stories we have of Anakin post Ahsoka until, a couple weeks from now. Woohoo! And I'm so excited. But and so that's interesting. I like the fact that one of the things both these books show is in these early days of the Empire, they're still using Venerator Star Destroyers and V-Wings, is mentioned a lot, which makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make sense that Palpatine would be like, I am the Emperor, and the next day TIE Fighters start flying. Like, but also since they're in the Outer Rim, they probably got the old stuff anyway, Right. So I like seeing that. I like when the authors try to, I'm not a prequel hater. I don't consider them good movies, but I'm not a hater of them. But so I like it when Star Wars creatives tie in the good stuff from the prequels into everything else, and so I think it does that well. It just, the narrative is just a little less than compelling. Yep. Okay, so that'll be it for this week. Next week we are going to come back and we're going to finish out the trilogy with Thrawn Treason. And then we're going to discuss it in the context of, discuss all three books in the context of the new canon. And also probably do a little compare contrast with the original Thrawn trilogy. The original Thrawn trilogy is a very important piece of work in Star Wars history. It basically was the boom that created the expanded universe, unless you count the Han Solo novels. And so we're gonna have a nice discussion about that.
Stop saying next week. I don't want Dave hitting me up next week going, where's the new episode? Why aren't you doing the new episode right now?
We'll just bank them. It'll be fine. Sorry. And then, of course, we'd like to say thank you to Mr. Dave West at Needless Things for putting this show up, apparently. Unless he listens to it and doesn't want to. But if it's content, he'll take it. Okay, are we good?
Sounds great.
All right.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.